The truth is more sinister than anyone could have guessed. Once viewed as the submissive daughter in the Duggar family's meticulously constructed public persona, Jill Dillard has spoken out in a bombshell exposé. Behind the entire facade of 19, she exposes a world of rigorous control, emotional manipulation, and concealed suffering. Children and growing. Jill's story reveals years of stress, pain, and secrecy, far from the idyllic life that is depicted on television. Are you prepared to learn Jill Dillard's secrets? Let's begin. Jill Dillard was raised in the Duggars, one of the most famous reality TV families ever, who appeared on TLC's 19 Kids and Counting. The Duggars were shown on screen as the model of ethically pure family values, deeply devout, and devoted to their big, close-knit community. Family. Behind the scenes, though, Jill and her sisters had to deal with a far more sinister reality that was kept secret for years. They spent a large portion of their childhoods dealing with a number of upsetting family secrets that, considering the public persona the family fostered, no one could have predicted. Jill started to come clean about the problematic dynamics in the Duggar household as she grew older, and started to separate herself from her well-known family. Jill and her sisters, who were formerly brought up under the close supervision of their dictatorial, domineering parents, started talking about their horrific experiences. The picture presented on television was significantly different from the reality revealed by these findings. Jill gradually became estranged from her family, following a string of traumatic incidents that made her face the unsettling realities of her childhood. Despite being presented as the Duggar family's obedient, devoted daughter, Jill later talked about the psychological and physical abuse that had been long maintained a secret. The picture of the ideal, devout family that had been meticulously constructed for the cameras stood in sharp contrast to these distressing tales of her early years. Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar had very high expectations for their kids, particularly in terms of behavior and beauty. Their family, which became well-known thanks to TLC's 19 Kids and Counting, adhered to stringent guidelines meant to preserve their reputation as a devout, traditional, and closely monitored home. Regarding the requirements were particularly strict for girls. Because the family believed in modesty, they were only permitted to wear dresses or skirts, never pants. In place of dating as it was generally understood, the children were encouraged to engage in a courtship system in which their parents planned and monitored romantic interactions. When it came to making choices regarding their personal lives, the girls had limited autonomy. Furthermore, the Duggar kids were prohibited from consuming popular media that their parents' rigid moral code found unacceptable, including music or television series. Public perception of the Duggars was one of unquestioning obedience, with the kids frequently seeming content to follow their parents' instructions and happy in their supervised setting. But when the kids got older and started to move out, the facade broke down and the underlying conflicts of their childhood began to show. Duggar, Jill, the second oldest daughter, was among the most obedient kids in the family. She rarely questioned her parents' authority and obeyed their rules. This was particularly clear during her courting with Derek Dillard, the guy her father, Jim Bob, had selected for her. Before meeting Jill, Derek had been a pen friend of Jim Bob's, and her parents closely watched their courtship. A new chapter in Jill's life began in 2014 when she and Derek were married following a time of romance. Although the union was a continuation of her parents' influence on her life choices, even if it was told as a love story. However, Jill gradually started to doubt and eventually separate herself from the constrictive regulations and the unspoken secrets that had influenced her upbringing as her life progressed outside of the Duggar household. Jill Duggar and Derek Dillard's 2014 wedding appeared to mark the beginning of a new chapter in their seemingly ideal lives. But nobody could have predicted the unexpected turn of events. It would quickly fall apart, creating an irreversible split within the Duggar household. Devastating news that rocked the Duggar household to its foundation surfaced less than a year after their wedding. Josh, Jill's brother, was found to have engaged in inappropriate behavior toward 4 of his sisters between 2002 and 2003. The world was shocked by the controversy of these acts being made public. For a long time, the Duggars were depicted as a pure, pious Christian family and such behavior, considering their carefully constructed image, was unthinkable. The disclosure marked the start of a protracted and agonizing ordeal for Josh's victims, particularly Jill. When it was revealed that Jill and her sister Jessa were two of Josh's victims, they were the focus of a media frenzy. Both Jill and Jessa made an appearance on national television, clearly distraught, but yet attempting to defend their brother in a widely reported interview with Megyn Kelly. They downplayed how serious his acts were, which made many viewers wonder if the family realized how serious the issue was. They tried to minimize what had happened, but the repercussions were inevitable. The Duggar family's reputation suffered greatly after the interview. The network that had shown 19 Kids and Counting for years, TLC, decided to terminate the program a month later. The Duggars' previously prosperous television career ended. However, TLC wasn't prepared to cut off all contact with the family. Rather, they chose to develop a Counting On relaunch that centered on Jill, Jessa, and their expanding children. Josh was not allowed to participate in the show because of the scandal, but it didn't help the family's reputation with the public or mend the scars inside the family. A new and terrible chapter in Jill's life began as a result of the aftermath from her brother's activities and the widening rift within her family. In 2017, following years spent in the Jill and Derek Dillard unexpectedly decided to leave the program while in the spotlight as part of Counting On, which sparked a major public disagreement. Since the pair had been heavily featured in the series, many were taken aback by their departure, which left fans wondering why they had changed so abruptly. But the public would be shocked to learn the real reason behind their departure, and the uproar surrounding it was only getting started. Derek started a Twitter tirade that would spark public indignation at the same moment as Jill and Derek left the show. Jazz Jennings, a transgender kid and star of TLC's I Am Jazz, was the target of his remarks. Both LGBTQ+ advocates and jazz aficionados reacted negatively to Derek's comments, which were widely viewed as insulting and transphobic. His remarks infuriated a lot of people, and the outcry was so strong that a petition was started to have him removed from the show of the family. Because of Derek's harsh comments, fans were demanding that TLC take action against him. TLC declared that they had broken up their relationship with Derek, and that he would no longer be working for the network in response to the public uproar. According to this statement, Derek's provocative remarks against Jazz were a primary cause of his resignation from Counting On. Derek quickly responded, though, with his own version of events, asserting that his disagreement with TLC had started months earlier. Derek claims that his decision to leave the program had more to do with fundamental problems with Counting On's production, which he had been increasingly irritated with over time, than the Twitter event alone. Although he made an effort to provide clarification, the damage had already been done, and the Dillards' future with the network and their relationship with the public were still threatened by the drama surrounding his departure. When Derek Dillard announced in public that he was leaving, he was largely silent about the true scope of the problems that had been simmering behind the scenes between Jill and her well-known family when he appeared on Counting On in 2017. At the time, Jill was considered by many to be the Duggar family's golden child, the embodiment of its rigid principles, and a model of obedience. In addition to Derek's divisive comments, her decision to leave the show sparked controversy and left many fans wondering what had led to such a drastic change in her life. The final arrangement between Jill and her family was startling and challenging for many to comprehend, particularly considering her prior unwavering devotion to her parents' values and regulations. Years passed before the entire scope of the rift was revealed. Long after their abrupt departure from Counting On, in 2020, Jill and Derek started sharing footage of their everyday lives on their YouTube page. Initially, the films were primarily informal vlogs that chronicled their family life and experiences. But as time passed, the pair opted to open up in a Q&A session after disclosing more intimate facts about their experience. Jill answered questions about her family and the rigid rules she had to follow as a youngster in these films, disclosing more about her childhood than she had ever done before. She opened up for the first time about the restrictions she had experienced as a child, describing how the strict structure of the Duggar family had influenced her choices and perspective on the world. She also talked about the reasons she no longer followed those guidelines, which marked a substantial departure from the principles that had previously guided her life. Jill came to terms with the fact that she was still estranged from her family, a sad reality that had been hidden from the public for years. Many were shocked when these private details were made public, since they revealed the very personal and sometimes tragic reasons behind her separation from her well-known family. Fans have been wondering about Jill's story for a long time, but now, taking place in real time, and the reality was considerably more nuanced than anyone had anticipated. Jill Duggar's family alienation seems to have a far more nuanced cause than anyone could have predicted. Jill grew obviously agitated as she clarified that she didn't want to go into the details of what had created the rift in a video that was shared with their fans. She said she had been battling arguments that caused her to be separated from her family, but viewers were left in the dark about the specifics. To make assumptions regarding the root cause, most people thought the tension sprang from her new way of life, or possibly from arguments with one of her many siblings. However, a few days later, Jill and Derek Dillard disclosed that the unexpected person was the cause of the rift. It was with Bob Duggar, Jill's father. Jill and Derek discussed the issues that had been building since they left Counting On in 2017 in later interviews. They revealed that even after years of participation, none of the Duggar, Jill and other kids have ever received payment for their appearances. Rather, the cash for each program in which the family appeared went to Bob Duggar. He had portrayed the show to the kids as a ministry, stressing that it was about furthering a higher good rather than making money. When Jill revealed the truth about the financial arrangements and her lack of payment for her time on the show, she said it had been difficult to accept. The disclosure took a sharp turn when Jill disclosed that she had filed a lawsuit against her dad. She explained that she had engaged a lawyer to help her recover the money. She felt she was due for years of labor on the family's program, but she did not disclose if she had actually filed a case. Derek went on to say that while it might have seemed like the family had benefited greatly financially from the show, the truth was far different. When broken down, the money they got barely exceeded the minimum wage. This disclosure was made in addition to it exposed the emotional toll and financial difficulties that had been concealed from the public for so long, adding another level of friction between Jill and her father. Following her marriage to Derek Dillard, Jill Duggar's departure from the rigid way of life that her parents, Jim, Bob, and Michelle, had instilled in her became increasingly evident. Jill, who had always lived up to the Duggar family's ideals by wearing modest clothing, staying away from the media, and leading a strict lifestyle, started to embrace fresh liberties. She began wearing jeans, watching TV shows, listening to popular music, and even getting her nose pierced after she married Derek. Decisions that were very different from the traditional and sheltered upbringing she had received. This significant deviation from her parents' standards signaled a change in her values and sense of self, and a break from the rigid regulations that had characterized her youth. However, Jill's parents did not approve of her change, and they were fiercely against her new way of life. Since their younger children were still living with them and adhering to the rigid standards of the family, they were worried that Jill's decisions might have an impact on them. Jill's connection with her family suffered greatly as a result of the mounting strain caused by her changing lifestyle and the unresolved financial dispute with her father. According to reports, Jill was essentially prohibited from going to her parents' house, which was a startling and unusual step in the Duggar family. This was the first time that any of the Duggar siblings had ever experienced such a terrible and public breakup. Joy, Jill's sister, who was once regarded as one of her closest relatives, appeared to publicly criticize her sister amid this widening gap. Joy's remarks were perceived as a subtly critical critique of Jill's decisions, even though she didn't specifically address the details of Jill's estrangement. This rift in society was especially noticeable because the Duggar family, well known for, had never seen such an open split between siblings in their close-knit ties. Her connection with the Duggars would be shaped for years to come by the extraordinary rift that resulted from Jill's decision to defy the family's teachings and her tense relationship with her father. The already strained relationship between Jill Duggar and her family was further exacerbated in 2020, when a post from the Instagram account Duggar Bates Confession sparked additional controversy. The article included, regarding Jill's distance from her family, a fan voiced bewilderment and annoyance at the way that Jill and Derek's private problems were made public. They say they want to mend the relationship one day, but but I don't understand why they need to make their issues with their families so public. Speaking out against them publicly will burn more bridges between them, the commenter wrote. I understand Jill Duggar needs to distance herself from her family for mental health reasons, but it's not very Christian, in my opinion, to go to media outlets and YouTube to air out their dirty laundry. I get the impression that Jill and Derek need money, and this is an easy way to get that money. The post, which was critical of Jill and Derek's decision to air their grievances publicly, became even more pointed when it was revealed that Jill's younger sister, Joy, had liked. As fans and followers noticed Joy's interaction with the post, her approval of the critical comment quickly garnered attention, and she later liked the post in an attempt to distance herself from the fallout. However, the damage had already been done, as it was evident that there was still significant tension within the post. This action was perceived as a subtle endorsement of the commenter's viewpoint, which implied that Jill and Derek were using their family issues for financial gain. In an October 2020 video, Jill stated that she and her family were actively working on healing their strained relationship, acknowledging that they had moved past many of their financial issues, which had contributed to the tension between them. She also expressed hope that reconciliation was possible, though the journey was still difficult. Duggar family, especially between Jill and some of her siblings. Despite the ongoing public scrutiny and family division, Jill and Derek remained committed to handling the situation with care. In April 2021, the Duggar family was rocked by a scandal that would forever change their lives. Josh Duggar, the eldest son, was arrested for possessing child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, on a computer at his workplace. The news was a devastating shock to the entire family, but the public nature of the disagreement, especially the involvement of social media and media outlets, continued to raise questions about how the family would mend their once close relationships. In particular, to his four sisters, including Jill, who had been victims of Josh's inappropriate behavior years earlier in 2003. The arrest not only brought the entire Duggar family back into the harsh spotlight, but it also brought back painful memories for his victims. Jill and her husband, Derek Dillard, expressed their sorrow in a brief statement to People magazine at the time of Josh's arrest. We only learned about this information yesterday, and it is very sad. Deep emotional toll the arrest took on them, because they had already cut ties with the family, because of old conflicts and unresolved issues. Jill's history as one of Josh's victims had always been a delicate and painful topic, and this new information brought it all back to the surface in a way that was extremely painful. Derek became more outspoken after the arrest about the Duggar family's deceptive public persona and their interactions with TLC, saying that Derek's criticisms revealed the family's behind-the-scenes struggles more than ever before, suggesting that the public's perception of the Duggars had been manipulated, with the truth about the family's internal issues being hidden for years. The arrest and Derek's subsequent statements marked another chapter in the ongoing unraveling of the Duggar family's carefully crafted image. The public had been misled by the Duggars and the network, which had painted an image of a wholesome religious family. Additionally, it exacerbated the already strained relationship between Jill and her family. As the consequences of Josh Duggar's arrest unfolded, it became more and more clear that the Duggar family was deeply divided. Although the parents, Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar, remained steadfastly by their son's side, many other family members started to voice their disapproval of Josh's actions. This divide was especially noticeable because the Duggar family had a long history of. Jinger Duggar and her husband Jeremy Vuolo were among the first to publicly distance themselves from Josh after the family's carefully crafted image began to show cracks due to Josh's arrest for possessing CSAM. Jinger had previously maintained a more progressive stance within the family, but her support for her brother seemed to diminish as the truth came to light. Additionally, Joy Anna Duggar and her husband Austin Forsyth, who had appeared to be on good terms, many of the Duggar daughters, who had long kept quiet about the family's internal problems, found themselves in a difficult position as a result of their decision to publicly express their disapproval of Josh's actions, which marked a significant break from the Duggar parents' unwavering support of their eldest son. This public split between the family members who supported Josh and those who did not became more pronounced over time. As more family members voiced their disapproval of Josh, it became evident that some were starting to make amends with Jill, who had been cut off from the family for years. The breakup between Jill and her parents had been one of the most startling parts of the Duggar family's disintegration. But as the conflict with Josh grew more intense, it appeared that some family members were trying to mend their relationship with her. Familial dynamic implied that Jill and her family could finally be able to heal after years of suffering.